okay? Every day I get home from work, and I put my watch, wallet, keys, ring, everything in the exact same place, only because that's why I do it. And if they're not there the next morning, I have a tantrum. Because a ritual that I performed, somebody broke. So when kids on the spectrum perform rituals, they know what they're doing. They know why they're doing it. It's just I don't know why they're doing it. We know why we do our rituals. They don't know why they do their rituals, okay? As a general set of criteria for looking at autism, well, individuals with autism tend not to make eye contact. That is almost the stereotypic defining characteristics of somebody with autism. They don't make eye contact. But going back to Stephen Shore's definition, I know people with autism that will stare you down in a staring contest. Okay, now there's a debate about why they don't make eye contact. Some people say it's painful. Some people say that they don't understand the face. Most of my friends on the spectrum who can tell me, who are verbal, say they don't understand your expression, so why should they look at you? Which sort of makes sense, right? You know, it's like if I'm trying to read a book and there's a page of Latin, I'm not going to stare at that page trying to figure it out. I don't have the resources. I'm going to flip to the next page, okay? Limited ability to speech, I said that. They may engage in stereotypic or self-stimulatory behavior. The quintessential autism stereotypy is sort of body rocking or hand flapping, you know, or whatever it is. But please, again, understand, all of you here engage in some stereotypy. If any of you here doodle, that's stereotypy. Okay? If any of you tap your pencil, that's stereotypy. I'm fascinated by the fact that we Americans think that when we're in the car, nobody can see in the glass. And we engage in a whole bunch of stereotypy that would be considered inappropriate under other circumstances. A real challenge with kids on the spectrum and adults on the spectrum is what we call, there's an absolute absence of fear of danger. Because danger is a social understanding. You have to be able to think somebody is out to hurt you, or that this situation is dangerous. So when we talk about including adults, children and adults in the community, we do have to be very, very aware of how do we give them the skills necessary to succeed outside in that world, okay? Lastly, there's some talk, one of the minor controversies in the autism field looks at sensory issues, that individuals with autism perceive sensory stimuli differently than you and I do. And it is a minor controversy because everybody accepts that there are sensory differences, but the issue to the extent to which they impact the person is sort of where the differences come in. So an individual with autism may appear to be deaf to you calling him, but then somebody opens a candy in the next room and they run all the way there. Okay? I have friends on the spectrum who complain about, there aren't fluorescent lights here, who complain about fluorescent lights because if your hearing is very acute, you actually hear them hum. Okay? And that's very distracting if you're hyperacute in your sensitivity to hearing. So all those things sort of come into that, all right? I want to talk about autism in Ohio. And these are the numbers that I got off the internet, so I have to source that. I think they're probably accurate, but anytime you get something off the internet, you know, there's always a chance that it's either going to be wrong or it's going to be pornography, one or the other. I think that's sort of what the internet does right now. But 2003 report, Autism in Ohio, school-age kids with autism in Ohio, 5,490 kids in 2003-2004. Okay, that's according to this website, which has from all states, so it is actually a valid website. These are good data. Increase from 1992 to 2003, 23,291%. Okay? That's a pretty significant leap, correct? Which gives us, if we look at numbers of family members, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, 49,410 family members. Okay? That's 2 parents, 2 aunts and uncles, okay, all this sort of stuff. And then if you multiply that across the lifespan, we're looking at about 197,640 people who are directly impacted by autism. And you know what? All of you are directly impacted by autism. Okay? The cost of educating kids, the cost of providing adult services, the cost of teacher training, like all these issues impact us all. Let alone, for adults with autism, we're impacted by businesses who are missing out on a tremendous resource. Okay? I cannot remember its name right now, but there's a company in Switzerland that's a software company that only hires people with autism because they are detail-oriented, they attend to code, they will sit and work on the code for hours. Like this is a man who said, you know what? We're going to take use of these things that other people may find challenging, and we're going to build a company around them. So if we're creative, if we're thoughtful, we can actually make this work to our advantage. Autism spectrum disorders generally are lifelong disorders. We don't know how many kids fall on what end of the spectrum. Okay, we used to say that 70% of kids diagnosed with autism also have mental retardation. We don't really say that anymore, primarily because in 1994, we changed the diagnosis. We expanded the diagnosis to include this group of kids who have Asperger's syndrome, who by definition don't have mental retardation. So once we changed that, sort of all bets were off. Okay, not unlike if you look at prostate cancer. Now, not comparing autism to prostate cancer, but for many, many years, prostate cancer was considered very rare. Then we got the PSA test, and the number of cases diagnosed with prostate cancer shot up like 10%. I mean, 100%, shot up tenfold. Okay, not that there was more prostate cancer, but they changed the diagnosis. They changed how you identify it. So, for adult diagnoses, one of the things that really is critical, and I run across a lot of individuals who get diagnosed in adults, particularly with this high-functioning Asperger's syndrome component. But we also tend to see for individuals across the spectrum, as they get older, we see some co-occurring conditions, including seizure disorders, bipolar disorders, depression, OCD, anxiety disorders, which oftentimes, unfortunately, go unreported or underreported, and thereby untreated. So if you think life is tough being on the autism spectrum to begin with, then have untreated bipolar disorder. Okay? That makes your life that much more challenging to begin with. We all know the prevalence. It was spoken about before, 1 out of 100. Why? Well, the big prevailing discussion that's in the news every 2 or 3 weeks, vaccines, right? Everybody's heard vaccines. My reading of all the literature that is out there indicates that there is no connection between autism and vaccines. Okay? Now, one of the challenges with saying that is that you can never prove a negative. Unless I designed a study where I had 1,000 kids who, when they were born, we said these kids are going to get vaccinated, and another 1,000 kids who weren't going to get vaccinated. That's the only way to prove whether or not there actually is a connection. But that's basically kind of sort of unethical. Let's take these 1,000 kids who we know we have a life-saving intervention and withhold it from them to prove a point. We don't do that, or at least we don't do that today. We used to do that many, many years ago. Okay? But there are other possible explanations for why we see an increase. One, better diagnostic procedures and awareness. You guys, the fact that I'm here today talking about autism indicates that there's far greater awareness. And once there's greater awareness, we tend to identify more of it. When Pfizer came out with their commercial about 12 years ago for Zoloft, for social anxiety disorder, and they had that little circle thing going across, and it was sad, and it was nervous, and they said, are you nervous in front of crowds? Do you not like speaking with people? Are you difficult, or are you nervous in new situations? You may have social anxiety disorder. Please contact your doctor. The next year, social anxiety disorder became the number one newly diagnosed psychiatric disorder in the country. Because Americans, their number one fear in life, public speaking. Number 2, death. We are more afraid of public speaking than death. So if someone says, I have a pill for your public speaking, we go, I'm in. Okay? So awareness is a big issue. I already mentioned we expanded the diagnostic criteria. That's a big thing when you add a whole group of individuals. There's actually some research now looking at diagnostic substitution. Paul Shattuck has done some very interesting research where he's found that as the diagnosis of autism went up in some school districts, the diagnosis of mental retardation and learning disabilities went down, basically by the same amount. Okay? Now, if you're thinking, well, where were these kids all along? They always were there. We just didn't call them that.